The kind of silence that exists inside noise is its own particular thing. Bellamy's fine dining occupied the ground floor of a glass tower downtown, and on a Thursday evening in late November, it hummed with the practiced sounds of wealth at leisure. The clink of crystal, the murmur of deals being shaped into sentences, the soft percussion of servers moving between tables with the discretion of people paid to be invisible. The lighting was the color of old amber. The tablecloths were the particular shade of white that communicates, without a word, that everything here will cost more than you planned. David Carter sat near the far wall. At a two-top, the hostess had placed beside a decorative pillar, not the worst table, not the best, somewhere in the middle geography that said, "We have space for you, but don't expect our attention." He was 38 years old, broad-shouldered in a way that his worn dress shirt couldn't quite hide, with the kind of face that had been weathered into stillness, not hardness, stillness. There's a difference, though most people don't look closely enough to find it. Across from him, Lily ate her pasta with the focused ceremony of a 6-year-old who has decided this is a special occasion and intends to treat it as such. She had put on her good dress navy blue, with small white buttons down the front, and had asked David 3 times before leaving the apartment whether her hair looked restaurant appropriate. He had told her yes each time. He meant it each time. "This fork has 2 lines, she said, examining it. "That's a salad fork. We don't have salad." "I know. They gave it to us anyway." She considered this, with the gravity it deserved, then set it carefully beside her plate, parallel to the edge, the way she had seen people do in the movies they watched on his laptop on Friday nights. David cut his chicken slowly. It was the second cheapest entree on the menu, and he had ordered it because Lily had wanted to come here. Her teacher had mentioned the restaurant by name, something about a field trip in the spring, and Lily had spent 2 weeks asking quietly. Not pestering, just asking in that patient way she had. He had looked at the prices twice before calling ahead. He had told himself, it was fine. It was fine. They were celebrating her birthday, which had been on Tuesday. He had made cupcakes on Monday night after she went to sleep, standing in their small kitchen with a box of mix and the seriousness of a man diffusing something. She had come downstairs in the morning and found them on the counter and said, in a voice that cracked something open in his chest, "You remembered." He always remembered. He had just never figured out how to explain that some things don't require effort to remember. They simply exist in you, the way breathing does. The table beside them, a four-top of men in blazers, laughed loudly at something, and one of them glanced over at David and Lily the way you glance at a car parked slightly too close to yours. An assessment, a mild annoyance, nothing more. The server had asked them twice if they were ready to order before they actually were, with a practiced impatience that stopped just short of rudeness. David had thanked her each time. He didn't hold it against her. People carried their assumptions the way they carried their phones without thinking, without noticing the weight. "Bo," Lily said. Then, correcting herself, the way she'd been doing lately, trying to split herself evenly between 2 languages. "Dad? Yeah, that lady is really pretty." He followed her gaze without meaning to. At the center of the room, at a table that had clearly been reserved rather than assigned, sat a woman who occupied space with the particular efficiency of someone accustomed to rooms organizing themselves around her. She was perhaps 34, 35, dark hair pinned back, a suit jacket in deep charcoal gray over a cream blouse. She was leaning forward across the table, speaking to 2 men whose body language said they were listening not because they wanted to but because they had to. Her hands moved when she talked, not dramatically, but precisely, like she was placing words in specific positions. Amelia Stone. David didn't know her name. He registered her the way he registered everything in a room. Exits, proximity, posture, the subtle language of bodies under pressure. Hers said, "She is holding something together that does not want to be held." "She looks busy," he said to Lily. "She looks tired," Lily said. He looked at his daughter for a moment. "Eat your pasta." She ate her pasta. The deal on the table, figuratively and almost literally, was a contract that Amelia's company, Meridian Group, had been pursuing for 14 months. The two men across from her were named Garrett Hollis and Philip Crane, and they represented a real estate development consortium that had more patience for caution than Amelia had patience for in general. The dinner was her idea. The restaurant was their choice. She had agreed without hesitation because she had learned long ago that conceding the small things made the important things easier to defend. She had been managing this negotiation across 4 cities and 11 months of revisions, and tonight felt like the moment it would either close or collapse. She could feel Garrett's hesitation. He kept touching his cufflink with his right thumb, a tell she had catalogued in their second meeting, and she was threading her words carefully through the gap between his caution and Philip's impatience. But the room felt too warm. She noticed it around 8:15. A slow warmth behind her sternum. Rising. She had been talking steadily for 40 minutes, which was not unusual for her. She had eaten perhaps a third of her meal. The wine was a Burgundy that one of her assistants had pre-selected, and she had taken 2 glasses, which was also not unusual. She touched her neck, a small gesture. She thought, "I'm tired. Close this and go home." Philip was asking something about the amendment in Section 4. And she answered him. She could hear herself answering him, measured and clear, while some quieter part of her inventory said, "Your hands are not quite right." They felt far away, like wearing gloves she couldn't see. She reached for her water glass and misjudged the distance by half an inch. The glass stayed upright. Neither man noticed. Garrett was speaking now. She focused on his face, the cufflink. The cufflink. Don't look at the cufflink, and the warmth in her chest was becoming something else. Something with texture and weight. Pressing upward. She would remember later, in the hospital, that her last coherent thought before it happened was, "I need to close this before I lose it." She meant the deal. She did not yet understand what she was about to lose. Her hand went out to steady herself, found the edge of the table, and then she was going sideways, not all at once, not dramatically, but in a terrible slow way that she could not stop. The wine glass went first, a sound like a small bell breaking, and then the edge of her shoulder met the table, and she slid from her chair and onto the floor with a sound that silenced the entire room in an instant. What followed was a kind of paralysis that no one in that room would be proud of later. The 2 men at her table were pancake, but standing, not moving. Garrett said her name twice, loudly. Philip took a half step and stopped. A woman at the next table gasped and pressed her hand to her mouth. A server froze mid-step with a tray at shoulder height. Someone near the bar said, "Oh God," and then said nothing else. The room had 32 people in it, not including staff. Among them were 3 lawyers, 2 financial executives, a hospital administrator, a semi-retired cardiologist who had drunk enough that he would later describe his inaction as stunned hesitation, and 14 other adults, capable in ordinary circumstances of making decisions. For 11 seconds, no one moved. Lily's small hand found David's forearm across the table. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. He was already standing. He did not run. That was the first thing people would remember afterward, in the particular way that unusual stillness becomes memorable when everything around it is frantic. He walked quickly, the kind of quickly that has a direction and knows it, weaving between tables with the automatic precision of someone who has moved through spaces under pressure many times. He didn't look at the people standing frozen. He looked at Amelia. She was on her side, partially against the base of her chair, one arm bent under her. Her chest was moving, he could see that from 6 feet away, and it let something in him exhale, but the movement was wrong, shallow, the kind of breathing that is doing the minimum required work, and struggling with even that. Garrett moved to intercept him. Not aggressively, just the way people move when they're afraid and want to do something with that fear. "Sir, please, move." 2 syllables, no inflection, not unkind, not harsh, just absolute. Garrett moved. David went to his knees on the left side, positioned himself to assess without interfering with her airway, and ran through it in the order it always had to go. Consciousness, airway, breathing, circulation. His hands moved while his brain counted. She was unconscious but responding to stimulus. Her eyes fluttered when he checked response. Airway clear, breathing present but shallow and labored. Pulse at the carotid. Present. Faster than it should be. Thin. He looked up without raising his voice. Someone call 911. Tell them female. Mid-30s. Loss of consciousness. Labored breathing. Tachycardic. Tell them she was at dinner, and whether she has any known allergies, ask her dinner companions. They may know. Philip Crane, to his left, blinked twice, and then had his phone out. Give her space. Back up, all of you. Back up. She needs air, and she needs the floor clear. He didn't wait to see if they obeyed. He knew from the sound of shuffling feet that they did. Does anyone have an EpiPen? Antihistamines? Anything pharmaceutical in a purse or a bag? No answer. He hadn't expected one, but it was always worth asking. He checked her again. The breathing had steadied fractionally. Maybe his moving her slightly had helped. Maybe the space around her, and he positioned her carefully into the recovery position, his movements deliberate and unhurried, in a way that seemed to require extraordinary effort, given the situation, and seemed to require no effort at all. The server with the tray had finally put it down. She was standing against the near wall with her hand over her mouth. 3 other servers had clustered near the kitchen door. Garrett was talking into his phone. Philip had crouched a few feet away, watching David with an expression that had moved past fear into something more complicated, the specific look of a man recalibrating something he had been certain of. A manager, a man in his 40s with silvering temples and a jacket that said "I am the authority here," came from the direction of the bar at a rapid walk. "Sir, I need you to step back. We have protocols for..." David looked up at him. Just looked. Something in that look, not a threat, not anger. Something more elemental than either made the manager stop speaking mid-sentence. "Your protocols can assist in a moment. Right now, you are blocking her air. Step back." The manager stepped back. In the far corner of the room, near the decorative pillar, a small girl in a navy dress sat with her hands folded in her lap and watched her father work. She did not cry. She did not call out to him. She sat very still and watched with the particular patience of a child who has learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is be still and let someone you trust do what they know how to do. After a moment, she picked up her salad fork and set it back down again, and then folded her hands once more. There is a specific quality of silence in a room full of people who are not talking. It is not like the silence of an empty room. It has weight and texture. It presses in from every direction. It is made of held breath and suspended thought, and the particular discomfort of 30 people, realizing that someone they overlooked has become the most important person in the space. David worked in that silence, the way surgeons work, without acknowledging the audience, without performing for it, without needing it to confirm that what he was doing was right. He spoke to Amelia in a low, steady voice as he worked. Not because she could necessarily hear him, he wasn't certain of that, but because he knew from experience that the voice is sometimes the thing that reaches through, even when consciousness has retreated. Short sentences, calm cadence. "You're okay. I have you. Help is coming. Stay with me." The words were unremarkable. The tone was not. It was the tone of someone who believes completely in what they are saying, who is not managing the other person's fear, but simply stating facts as they exist. Amelia's breathing had deepened slightly. Her color, which had gone the particular gray-white of circulatory shock, was beginning to move back towards something warmer at the edges. At the table by the pillar, a man in his 60s leaned toward his wife and said, in a voice that carried in the silence, "That's not a civilian response." His wife said nothing. She was watching David's hands. A woman near the window had her phone raised. Not filming but frozen, she had raised it instinctively, and then found she couldn't press record, found it felt wrong somehow, like interrupting something sacred. She lowered it. 2 other people had no such hesitation. The footage would be on the internet within the hour. But neither of those recordings would capture the thing that the people in the room were actually experiencing, which was not dramatic so much as it was simply precise. Watching someone who knows exactly what they are doing is its own kind of arresting. There is no spectacle in it. There is only competence, and competence in a moment of crisis has a beauty that is almost unbearable. The manager had retreated to the hostess station, where he was on the phone, presumably with emergency services. doing the useful thing he could do from a distance. Garrett had stopped pacing. He stood with his arms at his sides, his earlier agitation gone, replaced by something quieter. He was watching David's face and looking for something he couldn't name, some sign of uncertainty, some crack in the steadiness, and not finding it. Philip Crane had sat down on the floor. Not fainted, deliberately sat. The way you sit when your legs decide not to hold you anymore but your consciousness remains present. He sat cross-legged on the expensive restaurant floor and watched and said nothing. Bo will save her, Lily said to herself. Very quietly. Not quite a whisper. No one heard her. But she said it anyway. 4 minutes after he had reached her, Amelia Stone opened her eyes. It came back in pieces. That was how she would describe it later. Not a sudden waking but a reassembly. The world returning in fragments. Sound first. The ambient noise of a restaurant, nearby but muffled. Then the floor beneath her, cool and solid. Then a voice, close and even. There you are. Take a breath. Slow. She breathed. It cost more than breathing usually does. The face above hers belonged to a man she didn't recognize. Broad face, dark eyes, expression carrying the particular stillness of someone managing something significant. He looked at her the way professionals look at patients assessing. Present. Entirely without the frantic edge that would have frightened her more than the situation itself. Can you tell me your name? She did. Amelia. Good. Do you know where you are? Bellamy's. Her voice came out thin and strange to her. That's right. You passed out. Help is on the way. Don't try to sit up yet. One hand was at her shoulder, not holding her down. Just present. The contact of it was steadying in a way she couldn't have explained. Do you have any medical conditions? Allergies? No allergies. She wet her lips. Blood pressure. I manage it. Okay. Did you take your medication today? A pause. I may have forgotten. She closed her eyes briefly. Opened them. I've been traveling. Okay, that's helpful to know. The paramedics will need that. She could hear them now, the distant siren spiraling closer. The room around her was a collection of shoes and table legs, and the circle of faces above that she couldn't quite focus on. She didn't try. She looked at the man beside her instead, because his face was steady and everything else was not. I'm fine, she said. The words came out more reflexively than accurately. You're doing better, he said. The small distinction was precise, and she noticed it. That's different from fine. Give yourself a minute. The paramedics came through the door 90 seconds later, a team of 2, moving with the productive urgency of people for whom this is practiced work. They came to her, and the man beside her gave them a report without being asked. Timeline, initial presentation, respiratory and circulatory assessment, position, current status, the information about her blood pressure medication. It took 40 seconds, and it covered everything relevant. One of the paramedics, a young woman, 25 maybe, with the focused calm of someone new enough to the job to still take each case seriously, looked at David when he finished. You're medical? No. She studied him for a moment. This is a textbook response. Who trained you? Long time ago. He stood up. She mentioned blood pressure medication she may have missed. She's been traveling, possibly fatigued. He stepped back. She's in good hands. He turned and walked back to his table. The room watched him go. 32 people, plus staff, all of whom had been in that room for the last 7 minutes, and all of whom had, in one way or another, failed to do what this man had done. The weight of that was not comfortable. It sat in the room alongside the relief and the diminishing adrenaline and the sound of the paramedics working. And it didn't dissipate quickly. At the table by the pillar, Lily looked up as her father sat back down. She woke up, she said. She did. I knew she would. He picked up his fork. The chicken had gone cold. He ate it anyway. The restaurant did not recover its previous rhythm that night. Some things, once broken open, don't reassemble into the same shape. Amelia was taken out on a gurney conscious, talking to the paramedics. Her color more or less returned, and as the doors closed behind the ambulance, the room released a breath it had been holding for 11 minutes, and then became very quiet in a different way. The kind of quiet that follows something that was almost much worse. The server who had been impatient with David and Lily earlier, a young woman named Kara, 23, working her second month at Bellamy's, had watched the whole thing from the station near the wall. She came to their table now without being called and refilled Lily's water glass and stood there for a moment. "Can I get you anything?" she said to David. "Anything at all." He looked up. "We're okay, thank you." She nodded and left, and came back 5 minutes later with a slice of the chocolate cake that Bellamy's was known for, unbidden, unannounced, set down in front of Lily with a single birthday candle already lit. Lily stared at it. "How did you know it's my birthday? I heard you mention it," Kara said. Which was not quite true, she had asked the hostess, who had seen the reservation note David had left when he called. "Happy birthday." Lily looked at David. He nodded. She picked up the spoon. The man in his 60s, the one who had said, in the silence, "That's not a civilian response," stopped at their table on his way out. His wife waited 2 steps behind him. "Excuse me," he said. David looked up. "Remarkable thing." "What you did." He paused. And it was clear he was a man who had prepared to say something more precise, and was now finding it inadequate. "I'm Walter Pruitt. I was a trauma surgeon for 31 years. What you just did, the assessment, the positioning, the report to the paramedics, that was not first aid training." David said nothing. "I was sitting 40 feet away," Walter Pruitt continued, quietly. There was something in his voice that sounded like confession. "I'd had a drink and I told myself I was retired and told myself he had it handled, and I sat and watched. And I want you to know I'm going to think about that for a while." He put out his hand. David shook it. "Take care of her," Walter said, nodding toward Lily with the cake. He left. Garrett Hollis stopped by the table next without Philip, who had apparently left, and put a business card on the table without a word. Then he said, "That was the most competent thing I've seen in 20 years of watching people handle things." David didn't touch the card. Garrett left. The restaurant continued to quietly reorganize itself. Tables settled. Conversations resumed, but lower. The particular hum of a space recalibrating. A busboy swept up the wine glass. Someone straightened Amelia's abandoned table, and then the manager had it cleared and reset within 15 minutes. Because the work of a restaurant, like most work, does not pause for human drama. Lily finished her cake with the focus of a scientist. She got chocolate on her chin, and David reached over and wiped it off with his thumb, and she said "Dad" in the way that means stop it and also thank you. They paid the check. On the way out, 4 people looked at David in a way that was different from how people had looked at him when he came in. Not with celebration, with a specific, sober recognition that had no easy language. He didn't seek it out, and he didn't avoid it. He put his hand on Lily's shoulder, and they walked through the amber-lit room and out into the cold November air. In his pocket, Garrett's business card sat untouched. The footage went up at 9:47 p.m. It had been filmed from 2 different angles, one from a table closer to the window, one from near the bar, and they circulated separately before someone edited them into a single continuous cut set to nothing, no music, no narration, just the ambient sound of the restaurant and the small distinct sounds of a man working. By midnight it had been viewed 40,000 times. By morning, that number had an extra 0. The discussion it generated was, like most discussions, a mixture of the profound and the useless. But cutting through the noise was a recurring observation from people with specific backgrounds: nurses, paramedics, combat medics, emergency room techs, who watched the footage and made the same remark in different language. "That's not someone who took a weekend course. That's someone who did this for a living." The recovery position. The vocal stimulation while working. The precise report to the paramedics' timeline. Presentation. Vitals. Relevant history delivered without notes. Without hesitation. The body language that had cleared the space around her without a word. The instinct to position for both airway management and the specific circulatory concern that a blood pressure patient presents. A paramedic in Denver with 11 years of experience posted a breakdown in which he identified every correct decision in sequence, and noted that the response time, approximately 6 seconds from incident to first assessment, suggested someone who had responded to emergencies regularly over a parklet enema. Long period of time. An emergency medicine physician added, "Whoever this is, the instinct to ask about EpiPen first suggests either significant allergy response training or experience with anaphylaxis scenarios. The blood pressure question in the secondary assessment is solid clinical thinking. This person has worked somewhere where these things mattered." A woman named Patricia Oakes, who had been 3 tables away and had gone home and called her sister and talked until 1 in the morning about what she had seen, wrote a post the next day that said, "What I can't get out of my head is the little girl. She just sat there and watched her dad like it was the most normal thing in the world. And it was to her. He's that person to her every single day. And none of us in that restaurant knew it. None of us even looked at him. The reconstruction of who David Carter was took a few days, pieced together through the particular archaeology of the internet. And it was not complete and not entirely accurate, but it found the outline of the truth. 12 years earlier, David Carter had been a critical care technician and advanced EMT with the 75th Ranger Regiment, attached to a forward surgical team in 2 deployments. Before that, 3 years as a civilian paramedic in a city, with one of the highest trauma response rates in the country. The kind of career that is not built in training rooms, but in moments when training becomes the only thing standing between a person and what comes next. He had left emergency medicine 7 years ago. This was the part the internet speculated about most, and mostly incorrectly. The truth was simpler and heavier than the speculation. His wife, Claire, had died of a treatable infection following a routine surgical procedure at a hospital they had trusted completely. The systemic failure that led to her death was not dramatic. No villain, no negligence lawsuit. Just the quiet, catastrophic result of a system stretched too thin, making one missed step at the wrong moment. Lily had been 8 months old. He had been 31. He had not blamed the doctors. He had not blamed anyone, which perhaps was the hardest thing. He had simply taken his daughter home and decided that his first obligation was to her and that everything else would be organized around that fact. He had worked as a medical equipment technician for the years, since unglamorous work that kept flexible hours and kept him near enough to the knowledge he carried to not feel entirely removed from it, and he had not talked about any of this to anyone who didn't already know. He did not see the footage. He did not have accounts on the platforms where it circulated. He did not know, on Friday morning, that his face was on the screens of 2 million phones. He made Lily her breakfast and drove her to school, and came home and replaced a faulty sensor in a portable defibrillator, and ate a sandwich, and took a call from his equipment supply client, and did not think about the restaurant, except once, briefly, when he wondered if the woman had been discharged yet. Amelia Stone was discharged on Friday afternoon with a blood pressure cuff, a prescription adjustment, a thorough lecture from a cardiologist named Dr. Whitmore about the relationship between chronic stress, travel, and medication compliance, and the particular chastened quality of someone who has been briefly removed from the world they manage and is already thinking about how to re-enter it. Her assistant, Kevin, was in the waiting room with her coat and a revised schedule for the following week. Garrett Hollis had sent flowers and a note. Philip Crane had called twice. The deal was, apparently, still on the table. She sat in the discharge waiting area and watched Kevin talking quietly on his phone and thought, "None of this is what I want to think about." She wanted to think about the man on the restaurant floor. She had asked Kevin to find footage when she woke up in the morning, and he had found it immediately because it was everywhere by then. She had watched it twice on his tablet, lying in her hospital bed with the BP monitor beeping gently beside her. She had watched her own collapse, and then watched the man appear from the edge of the frame, not running, walking, quick but contained, and she had watched him work. She had watched his hands. She had watched his face. She could not reconcile, watching it, the efficiency of what she was seeing with the man she vaguely remembered sitting at the corner table in the worn shirt. She had registered him in the peripheral way she registered most things that were not her immediate concern. A man, a child, unremarkable. She had assigned him a category and moved on. He had not fit the category. That was the thing she kept returning to. She had been wrong, and she was rarely wrong about assessments, and the extent to which she had been wrong, the gap between what she had assigned him and what he actually was significant enough that she wanted to understand it. "Kevin," she said. He lowered his phone. "I need you to find out who he is." Kevin, who was 27 and had worked for Amelia for 3 years and had therefore developed a sophisticated ability to understand which of her requests were urgent and in what specific way they were urgent, said, "Already started." She found the address through Kevin, who had found it through the kind of patient, thorough research he was very good at. Not his home address. She had drawn a line at that, instinctively, because it felt wrong to arrive at a man's home without warning. She found instead where he worked, a small medical equipment service company on the 4th floor of an office building on Hargrove Street, 2 blocks from a park where, Kevin had established, he often took his daughter on Saturday mornings. She went on Saturday. She stood outside the park entrance in her coat, with the collar up, and felt, for the first time in a long time, uncertain. Not in the way of professional uncertainty, which she was equipped for, but in the personal way that she had been managing around the edges of for years, without looking at it directly. She saw the girl first. Navy coat, light hair catching the November light. Crouching near a puddle to examine something at its edge, with the complete absorption of a scientist at work. Then the man behind her, one hand in his jacket pocket, the other holding 2 coffee cups, watching her with the quiet attention of someone for whom watching carefully is a primary activity. He looked different outside the restaurant, less out of place, more himself, as though the restaurant had been the wrong frame. She walked toward him. He saw her coming 20 feet out. She watched him recognize her, not the startle of it, just the calm registration, and he waited without moving. The way he seemed to do everything. "Mr. Carter," she said, which surprised him slightly, that she knew his name. "Miss Stone." A pause. "You look better." "I feel better." She stopped an arm's length away. "Thank you seems inadequate." "It's adequate." Lily had looked up from her puddle and was now watching Amelia with the direct, unmediated curiosity of a 6-year-old. "I remember you," Lily said. "You fell down." Amelia crouched slightly, bringing herself to something closer to eye level. "I did. My dad helped you." "He did. He was very good at it." Lily considered her. "He's good at most things," she said, with the matter-of-fact conviction of someone reporting an estate. They walked, the 3 of them, which was Lily's idea. She had spotted a section of path with interesting leaves, and it seemed rude to remain stationary. Amelia fell into step beside David, while Lily ran ahead, in the focused zigzag of a child, following a private logic. "I read about your background," Amelia said. "I hope that's not I needed to understand what I'd seen. It's public record. I also read about your wife." A pause. "I'm sorry." He was quiet for a moment. "Thank you. You left emergency medicine to raise her alone." "I left emergency medicine because it was the right choice at the time." The distinction was small, but he made it with clarity. She wasn't the burden. She was the reason. Amelia watched Lily pick up a leaf, examine it, and place it carefully in her coat pocket. "She's remarkable." "She is. Simple as that." "Can I ask you something honest?" "You can ask. When you came across that room when no one else was moving, what were you thinking?" He was quiet for a few paces, not hedging, just finding the right words. "I wasn't thinking. I was doing." Thinking comes after in those situations. If you've done it enough times, the body takes over. But you chose to. I didn't choose to not move. He looked at her sideways. "That's different." She turned that over. She understood the distinction. "You could have stayed at your table and justified it." "Most people did." "I know. Doesn't that bother you? That they didn't?" "It bothered them more than it bothers me." "The trauma surgeon, who stopped at my table, he'll be thinking about it for a year." "That's enough." Lily circled back to them and wedged herself between them on the path, which required both adults to make small adjustments. She did not appear to notice having done this. She was examining the leaf. "Maple," she announced. "It has 5 points." "Sugar maple," David said. She looked up at him. "How do you know it's a sugar and not a red?" leaf color, size, and the shape of the sinuses, the spaces between the points. Lily turned to Amelia with the expression of someone demonstrating a valuable resource. "He knows a lot of things. I can see that," Amelia said. They found a bench. Lily took the other coffee cup from David and held it between her palms as though warming something precious, and Amelia sat on the other side, and they were quiet for a moment, in the way that is not awkward, but is simply a pause in which something is being decided. "I want to do something," Amelia said. "I haven't decided exactly what yet, which is unusual for me. I usually know what I want before I move. What are you thinking?" Meridian works in a dozen sectors. Healthcare infrastructure is one of them, not our primary, but substantial. We have relationships with hospitals, emergency response networks, training organizations. She was looking at the path as she talked, thinking aloud with the precision of someone whose thinking is usually done before it's spoken. There are systemic gaps in emergency response capacity in this city, not in the official systems in the civilian side. The gap between an emergency beginning and professional help arriving. Most people can't bridge that gap. No, you can. And you've trained others before the Ranger unit, the civilian teams. She glanced at him. What would it take to build something? He was looking at Lily, who had gotten up to investigate a squirrel. Build what, exactly? A training program, community embedded, not a corporate initiative with a logo and a press release. An actual program, neighborhood level, practical, designed around the situations real people actually encounter. With you as the core architect. Silence. "I'm not looking for a figurehead," she said. "I'm not looking to attach your story to a brand. I watched the footage, and I talked to the paramedic who briefed the cardiologist on your response. And what I want is the thing you actually did not, the mythology around it. What you watched was muscle memory from 12 years of work. Exactly. That's the thing that can be taught." She turned toward him slightly on the bench. "Not the instinct that takes time to build, but the framework. The response. The knowledge that turns a paralyzed room into a functioning one." He was quiet long enough that the squirrel Lily had been investigating gave up on her and departed. "I have conditions," he said. She waited. The schedule has to be built around her. Not adjusted, built around her. School. Appointments. The things that matter to her. Done. I'm not a spokesperson. My name doesn't go on anything public. Agreed. I pick the methodology. I pick the curriculum. I can hear your input, and I can take it seriously, and I can tell you when I disagree. I'd expect nothing else." He turned and looked at her then, directly, with the same quality of attention she had seen in the restaurant, present and undeflected. "Why does this matter to you?" "Personally, I mean, not professionally." She held his gaze. "Because I was lying on a floor, and 30 people stood around me and didn't know what to do. And I am 34 years old, and I have built a company, and managed hundreds of people, and I couldn't tell you the last time I felt that helpless." She paused. "And then one person walked across a room and knew exactly what to do. And it didn't require special equipment, or a title, or a decision made in advance. It just required that someone, at some point, had taught him." And he remembered. Her voice had dropped to something quieter. "I want more people to know. That's the honest answer." Lily came running back with a pine cone in each hand. "For the collection," she announced, and deposited one in David's jacket pocket and one in Amelia's coat pocket without asking, and then stood before them with the satisfaction of someone who has distributed resources efficiently. Amelia looked down at the pine cone in her pocket. She had not thought about her pocket containing anything other than her phone in approximately 3 years. "Thank you," she said to Lily. "You can have it," Lily said. "I have lots." The program started small, which was intentional. Which was David's first and most important requirement. Not a launch event. Not a press package. A church basement in the West Side neighborhood on a Tuesday evening in January, with 17 adults sitting on folding chairs and a whiteboard borrowed from the Sunday school room. David stood in front of them without a presentation deck or a microphone and said, "We're going to cover what you do in the 4 minutes before the ambulance arrives. That window is the difference in a significant number of outcomes. You don't need to be a doctor. You don't need to be a lawyer. You don't need to be a fictional. 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 You don't need to You need to know 4 things. He taught them 4 things. The session went 2 hours. 3 people stayed an extra 40 minutes to ask questions. A woman named Dorothy Briggs, who was 68 and had lived in the neighborhood for 41 years, and had watched a neighbor die of a cardiac event on his front steps 6 years ago while people stood around calling 911 but no one performed. Seper cried briefly in the parking lot afterward and then dried her eyes and came back in to thank him. Amelia did not attend the first session. This was David's explicit request, and she had honored it. She received a summary from the Meridian employee who handled logistics, a woman named Sandra Reese, who had been selected specifically for her ability to support without hovering. The second session had 31 participants. The third had 44 and had moved to a larger room. By April, 6 cohorts were running in different neighborhoods. By June, the program had been requested by 2 school districts, a fire station auxiliary, and a community college. None of this was advertised. It moved the way things that work actually move, through word of mouth, through the specific credibility of people who had sat in those rooms and gone home knowing something they hadn't known before. Amelia came to the 6th session not as an observer with a clipboard, but as a participant. She sat in the 3rd row in jeans and a plain sweater with her phone turned off in her bag. She watched David teach the same way she had watched him work in the restaurant, with the attention of someone cataloging something, trying to understand its mechanism. He was a different kind of precise in front of a group than he was one-on-one. Economical. No words spent on preamble or persuasion. He demonstrated and then made them do it. And he corrected without embarrassment, and praised without effusion, and the room, which had come in with the slightly self-conscious energy of adults sitting in school, loosened within 20 minutes into the focused ease of people who are learning something that feels real. Afterward, in the parking lot, she found him at his car, Lily asleep in the back seat with her jacket over her. Like a blanket, he had picked her up from an evening birthday party before coming. "You didn't tell me you brought her," Amelia said. "She was fine. She brought a book." Amelia looked at the small figure in the back window. She read through a 2-hour first aid course. She fell asleep after the first hour. She usually does. Amelia laughed, a real laugh, sudden enough that it surprised her. "You're carrying her like a logistics problem. She's the main logistics problem. Everything else is secondary." Amelia leaned against the car next to him, not facing him but alongside him, which felt right in the way that not forcing things to face each other sometimes does. "The fire station wants to expand the curriculum," she said. "Advanced airway management." The battalion chief called Sandra 3 times. "I know. I'll talk to him. 2 of the school districts want it as a graduation requirement. That takes a curriculum committee and a year of approvals. I can help with that. I know you can." He looked at her sideways. "You're good at clearing paths." She considered that. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. She let it sit. The night was cold and clear. Somewhere down the block a dog was being walked, its nails ticking on the pavement. And the small, ordinary sound of it was pleasant. "I've been thinking about what you said," she said. "In the park. About choosing not to not move. It was straightforward. It wasn't to me. I've spent 14 years choosing to move, constantly moving. And I thought that was the same thing. I thought constant motion was the same as choosing to show up." He didn't say anything. "Lying on that floor and watching you work, I kept thinking this is someone who knows what matters. Not what has a title and a budget and a strategic value. What actually matters when it's just a person and another person and 4 minutes. You found the same thing. You just found it differently. Maybe." She looked at the parking lot. The sodium lights. The ordinary quiet of it. "Kevin wants me to do a profile. A magazine piece. CEO transforms first aid training after near-death experience. He thinks it would do a lot for the program. What do you think?" "I think it would bring the wrong kind of attention to something that's working because it doesn't have the wrong kind of attention." She paused. "So, no." He nodded once. "I'm getting better at saying no to things that would cost more than they're worth." A small sound from the back seat, Lily shifting, murmuring something, resettling. They both glanced toward the window. She had pulled the jacket tighter. "She's amazing," Amelia said. "I know. You said she was the reason. Not the burden, the reason." "Yes. I didn't know people meant that literally." She said it quietly, without self-pity, simply as a true thing. "I thought it was something people said." David was quiet for a moment. Then, "Most things that sound like something people say are things that started as something true." She turned her head toward him. He was looking at the middle distance, in the way he always seemed to look at things, not past them, not through them, just at them, with the patience of someone who knows that looking is its own activity, and doesn't need to be hurried into something else. "Same time next Tuesday?" she said. "Same time." She pushed off the car and put up her collar and walked toward her own car 3 spaces down. She had the pine cone from the park in her coat pocket. She had not taken it out. She wasn't sure why. She didn't examine it particularly closely. She just hadn't taken it out. In the spring, when the program expanded into its 8th neighborhood and the graduation requirement approval came through for both school districts, there was a small celebration not organized by Amelia's company, but by Dorothy Briggs, who had put out a sign-up for potluck contributions in the church basement and had managed, with the efficiency of a woman who had been organizing community events for 4 decades, to produce a gathering of 90 people and a sufficient quantity of food to feed twice that. David brought Lily, who wore her navy dress with the white buttons, and carried a covered dish of brownies she had made under David's supervision, which she handed to Dorothy Briggs, with the formality of a diplomat presenting credentials. Dorothy thanked her with full ceremony. Lily was satisfied. The evening had the quality that good things sometimes have: unhurried, unspectacular, full of small conversations between people who had sat in the same basement and learned the same things, and now shared a particular knowledge and a particular responsibility. Several of them had already used what they'd learned. There was a man who had performed CPR on a neighbor in October, and the neighbor was still alive. There was a woman who had managed a choking emergency at her daughter's daycare. There were 6 people who had known what to tell the 911 dispatcher, which had mattered more than most people know. Amelia arrived late and without announcement, and found a seat near the back and ate 3 brownies that she later told David were the best brownies she had eaten in recent memory. And he said it was the baking soda ratio, and she said she didn't know what that meant, and he said he knew. And Lily appeared from somewhere and said, "I made them with the proprietary pride of a creator whose creation has been well received." And Amelia said they were spectacular. And Lily sat down next to her with a 4th brownie, and they watched the room together without talking, which was comfortable in the specific way that silences are comfortable when you are both looking at something worth looking at. David was across the room talking to the fire station battalion chief. He was using his hands more than usual, which Amelia had learned to read as enthusiasm, even though it looked to the untrained eye like restraint. "He likes this," Lily said. "I can tell. He doesn't like a lot of things as much as this." She considered the room with an expertise that exceeded her years. "He likes fixing equipment. He likes Saturday mornings. He likes this." She paused. "He likes you." Amelia looked at her. Lily was entirely focused on her brownie. "He doesn't say it like normal people say things," Lily continued, philosophical. "He just does things. That means he likes them." She looked up, evidently finished with the topic. "Can I have another brownie? I think you should ask your dad." Lily evaluated this logically. "He'll say yes." "Then ask him." She went off across the room. Amelia watched her thread between the adults, with the confidence of a child who has learned to move through rooms, and stop at her father's side, and tug his sleeve, and receive from him the answer she had predicted: a nod, a small smile, a hand on the top of her head that she ducked under, and simultaneously leaned into. The exact paradox of a child becoming a person while still needing to be held. Outside the church basement windows, the spring evening was settling into the dark blue of 9 o'clock. A street lamp threw its circle of light on the sidewalk, and a moth made widening loops around it, drawn to the brightness it couldn't understand, but couldn't leave. Amelia took the pine cone out of her pocket and looked at it, small, dry, unremarkable, and put it back. She had, sometime in the last few months, stopped carrying it out of habit, and started carrying it on purpose, which was a different thing, and she understood the difference the same way she understood most differences. By noticing it and finding it mattered. Across the room, David caught her eye above the heads of the people between them. He raised his coffee cup slightly. She raised hers. It was not a dramatic gesture. It required nothing, and promised nothing, and carried no more weight than two people, across a room, acknowledging that the other one was there. In a restaurant 4 months ago, a room had gone silent because everyone in it had looked at a man in a worn shirt and assigned him a category. They had been wrong. The category they'd given him had no room for what he actually was, for the precise and steady knowledge he carried, for the years behind it, for the daughter who had grown up watching him be exactly himself. The lesson, like most lessons worth having, was not a comfortable one. You could spend your whole life looking at things and not seeing them. You could sit in a well-lit room, surrounded by people, and be entirely alone in your misreading of the world. The antidote was not complicated, and it was not quick. You simply had to look more carefully, and keep looking, and resist the economy of assigning people to categories before you had earned the right. In a church basement in spring, 90 people who had learned something real ate brownies and talked, and a girl with a navy dress moved through them like she owned the room, and a man in a worn shirt made plans with a battalion chief that would, in 6 months, change a training protocol in 11 fire stations. And a woman with a pine cone in her pocket thought, this is what it looks like when things are actually working. Not spectacular, not smooth, not without cost, just real, and worth it, and continuing.